radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening, Fade to Black. Today is Monday, September 18th, 2023. Let's do this, man. How you doing? We have got 5 shows this week. Normally it's Monday through Thursday, 4 shows. We've added a 5th show this week. That will be on Friday night. A very special presentation with Melissa Tittle. And we are going to do a presentation about the Peru mummies that went down in Mexico City in front of the Mexican Congress. And we will be talking about that and a whole lot more when it comes to Nazca and Cusco and the mummies down there. So that will be Friday night, 5 shows this week. Help support the show. It's easy to do. Just get yourself a Faded Black t-shirt. The links are below. You know how to do it. Click on the links. You can do it through a Game Changer membership, or you can just order a t-shirt. We have both t-shirts available and shipping, and it includes shipping, and everything is autographed. So get yourself a Fade to Black t-shirt today and help support everything that we do around here. Tonight, a very big show because our friend Christopher Dunn is back with us. And tonight we are going to be talking about the Great Pyramid. And I've sort of framed this show tonight that we're going to be covering every angle. We're going to be doing a full night, a full deep dive of construction, of course, its possible uses, the evidence. And I'm going to talk about Egyptology and how all of this plays into this too as well. Our guest tonight is Christopher Dunn. And now here's the deal. Now, he was born in Manchester, England. By the way, I just got back from Manchester. Everybody knows that. And I'm also going to be going back to Egypt here in about 10 days. And I'll be out there for a couple of weeks. Very excited to have Chris on the show. But he was recruited by an American aerospace company. He immigrated to the United States in 1969. But for 52 years, he has worked at every level of high-tech manufacturing, from machinist and toolmaker and programmer and operator of high-power industrial lasers, project engineers, laser operations manager. For 17 years, he served as a human resource director for a Midwest aerospace manufacturer. But the odyssey started in 1977 after he read Peter Tompkins' book, The Secrets of the Great Pyramid. And I have that book too as well. Now, it's his reaction to that and the Great Pyramid's precision and its design characteristics. And when you have a background like Chris, you are going to look at things a little bit differently. And he did just that. He published over a dozen magazine articles, including the much quoted Advanced Machining in Ancient Egypt in Analog Magazine, August 1984. His research referenced in over a dozen books on Egypt. In the United States, he has discussed his research and appearances on PAX television, the History Channel's Ancient Aliens, of course, the Travel Channel, Discovery Channel, Learning Channel, Lifetime, and additionally, he has made numerous presentations on his ancient Egyptian findings at conferences worldwide. His website, where you need to spend your time, is gizapower.com. The links for that are below, and I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, the one and only. Here he is. I'm serious. He is here, and he's right there, Christopher Dunn. Chris, good evening, young man. How you doing?
I'm okay, Jimmy. Thanks for the young.
Yeah, right. And it's so funny. We were talking about our ages before the show, And I find that very, very interesting for a lot of reasons. One, I'm getting a little tired of hearing, 70 is the new 40, 60 is the new 30. But it's true. And you are evidence of that, right? I'm going to be 60 next week. I'm going to be 60.
Well,
And when you and I were kids, 60 were, those were the old people and they acted old. You don't act old. So you're
yeah,
proof of
blissfully
that.
immature.
Yeah,
But
right.
my father always said that youth was wasted on the young, and I always try to surround myself with I don't people who have a young spirit, and basically you can keep that for your entire life.
Yeah, you can. You can. And do you, let's stay right there for a second. You brought up a key word, bliss. And I do believe that keeps you young. But have you found your bliss?
I've found it many times. I've lost it too. It's like you can grab it. One of the things that I've learned in life is that you know you don't pursue happiness. You wait for it to find you, and you actually, in order for it to find you, you have to behave in a certain way. And I think that once a person goes through a period of self-examination, uh, and basically corrects his compass, if you will, to go in the right direction, then you are in tune with uh, what you were put on the earth to do.
Yeah, it is that. Life is a series of corrections, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
you have to constantly be correcting and examining. It's like I'm a big fan of Rene Descartes, and I talk about him in my new book. But the Descartes is a philosopher. He basically set the foundation for scientific inquiry in terms of his meditations on doubt, and Descartes, the axiom that maxim that he kind of published was that things that can be doubted should be rejected, and and so one of the
Oh, we lost you for just a second there, Chris. It dropped out. We've been fine all night. Okay, so we're talking about Dakar, and let's see if this resets. Okay, very strange. Very strange. We've been yapping all night without any issues. Okay, and I don't know if you can hear me, Chris. Okay, so let me pull you out for just a second and let's see if this resets. And if you can hear me, and this does not reset if you do not come back to us, um, unplug, go out and come back in. And let's see if you do that. That means you can still hear me. And we'll have you just exit the studio and come back. Let's see. Yeah, Chris is gone, as everybody can see. His signal has dropped. Okay, so Chris, see if you can exit and come back in. Just close out that screen and come back in, and I will see you back here. I am going back to Egypt in a couple of weeks, and Chris and I. Okay, so he's just left. He'll be right back, and we'll just do a reset. Not that big of a deal. Chris and I were talking earlier, and as everybody has heard many times in the last year since I got back from Egypt, is that you can go Egypt is such a spiritual journey. It's a personal experience for everybody. You're just going to go, and whatever happens, happens. And that's the only way to approach it. And I was told that so many times by different researchers, and I didn't really let it sink in. And then you go, and then now that's what I've been sharing with everybody. And when somebody comes up to me and says, okay, everybody wants to hear about the Great Pyramid. And I get that. I totally understand that. And it was the same thing for me too, as well. And when you go around and experience different sites, and then you come back to the Great Pyramid, and you step up to it, and your expectations are high. There are so many that have come to me and said, I went into the King's Chamber. We were oming with a group of people, and it was resonating, and this happened, and this spiritual thing, and I saw this. All right, I get that. I totally get that. It's your journey. It's your personal thing. I totally understand that. But for me, and I wasn't influenced by anything. I stepped into the Great Pyramid, and I was first in, and I was able to absorb it on my own terms. And I remember, you go through the tunnel that's blasted first, and you go through that, then you up the passageway, the tunnel. And you come out of that. It's not stressful or anything. It's cool. It's open and stuff. Anyway, but when you come out of that and you stand there and you look up into the grand gallery, that's the moment right there. And it didn't hit me. And I don't know what my expectations were. What did hit me, and I have said this to many people, and I've said it on this show. What did hit me was the mechanical feeling, this factory, this impersonal thing. That's what hit me, and I don't have another way to explain it. Okay, so Chris is back, but he's still not here. He's gone and come back. I'm waiting for him to pop up. Everybody, I'm watching, okay, just to let you know. But that wasn't there for me. So when I have that type of impact, I have to go back and think about the research that Christopher Dunn has presented to us over the years. You go and you read that, the Giza Power Plant, and you go through and look at the analysis of the possibilities of what the different chambers were there for, and was water involved? Was there a chemical process involved? What were all of the shafts used for? The obvious things when we talk about the shafts, specifically going into the King's Chamber and the Queen's Chamber too, as well, and Gate and Brink's door, and why some shafts apparently had blocks that were placed into them. When the Egyptologist side of things over the years has said that the shafts were pointing at specific stars at a certain time of the night. And that's the reasons that they were there. And you have to stop. Then why would they block it off? That's the first thing. The second thing is that these shafts aren't perfectly straight. So if you were going to look out of the shaft, and how would you see through the pyramid to the night sky, especially without a telescope, right? How does that happen? It's that part of it. It's like the defense's case doesn't hold water. But then we look at the other ideas behind it. Was it a way to release gas? Was it a way to bring in something else? Was it for oxygen? Was it so people could breathe. There's that aspect of it too, as well, to release heat, to allow pressure to leave from the inside of the pyramid for various reasons, which negates this star alignment thing. And then again, it could be an alignment to the stars, which is very special in of itself. But could there be other reasons for all of this? And my reaction is an honest one. It was like, as impressive as it is, and you are impressed by the size of the Great Pyramid, totally impressed. But and I enjoyed shooting the video, and I enjoyed my time by myself outside of the pyramid and the video that I shot. It's such an enigma, and it's so powerful, it's so strong, and there's so much weight, and there's the immensity of everything that is there. I totally appreciate all of that. But a spiritual side, a spiritual journey, I didn't get that from the Great Pyramid. And now Chris is back with us. Chris, I'm not sure why your screen is blank, even though you are there and everything is activated. Chris, speak to me. Let me see if your vocals are there. And no, so that's not lined up either. Okay, so I've got you, Chris, but I don't. Oh, now he's left again. Yeah, we had a great sound check, by the way. We went through everything. I've got images here to present and everything else. So Chris also told me in the sound check that he used to play guitar when he was a kid. Yeah, that's pretty cool. He said he was classically trained as a pianist and took piano lessons and then gravitated towards guitar in 1958, which is what everybody seemed to have done back in 1958 because of Elvis Presley and Chuck Berry and Buddy Holly and everything else that was going on back then. Okay. So that was my thing. And now I am going to be going back in 10 days. The thing that I talk about a lot, which is what, the hard sciences try to do, which is observe, measure, repeat, right? Laboratory setting. That, I have the same experiences, I should say, throughout Egypt. I'm going to keep everything. I'm going to start back at zero, but knowing exactly what I went through so many times at different sites around Egypt. Will they repeat at the same sites? Will they not? Will something else happen at another site? We're also going to be going to a couple of new locations, so I'll be able to experience those for the first time. But I'm very curious about the Giza Plateau and my experience with the Great Sphinx, which I found profound, and then my experience with the Great Pyramid. And will that change? Will something else result from that? I can't put it any more into words than the way that I have described it to everybody. When I just looked up at the Grand Gallery, I just went, that looks like it looks like a machine. And I know that Chris Dunn and others have talked about this, but on both sides of the stairs that go up, you see it, these repeating notches in the floor, right? And those are going up, and the way that the gallery comes together, and then the top of everything, it's got this purpose. There's a purpose to it. It doesn't feel ceremonial. It doesn't feel ceremonial at all. Okay, let me see. Let me check on something really quick. And I think, okay. Chris, okay. He says he doesn't understand what's going on. So you're going to see me do this in real time. I see you coming in, but it's blank. All right. Keep trying. That's all I can say. That's all I can say, Chris. Keep trying. Okay, I'm sending this off to you now. Yeah, it's very strange how everything was effortless all night. Everything was just really simple. So what I don't want to have to do is back off on this. Okay, so let me end this. Okay. I have another thing that was happening at the same time, so I'll pull that out and see if it changes anything. But yeah, that's where I'm at with this. When I walked around the perimeter of, and I was alone, when I walked around the perimeter of the Great Pyramid, and I'm running my hands along the first row of stones, and okay, now you're back. Okay, hey Chris,
Yeah.
don't tell me what you did, like you unplugged something and plugged it back. We don't need to hear that. You're back now. And so let's actually start here. The fight, the battle, the rolling of the rock uphill is something that you chose to do. And something triggered inside of you that made this your life's mission, your hero's journey, and you found your bliss. But has it ever gotten frustrating for you? Have you ever backed off and went, you know what, it's just not worth it? Or you just stuck to it and you know what, damn the torpedoes?
Wow. That is a hell of a question, Jimmy. The answer to your question is yes, I did back away from it. Certain aspects of it. One of them was after engaging with people on message boards, where you have a lot of Google scholars who access a few web pages and think that they're experts, and and then actually doing that for 8 years between.
We froze up again. Something strange is going on here, Chris. Something strange is happening. And I don't know. I don't know what it could be. And normally, everybody, when this happens, it's the Wi-Fi and it's repeating, and then it'll come back and catch up. But I'm not seeing that with Chris. It's just an instant freeze. But yet, we had everything running for 30 minutes, and there was no issues at all. And then suddenly, we've got this. So, Chris, I don't know how to explain this. Let's try this one more time. And if you can hear me, just back out and come back in and do another reset like you did before. This is very strange. So he's going to do it again. He's just left. Yeah, everything is fine. There's no jitter. There's nothing going on. Very, very strange. Very strange. And now, here's the other thing, everybody. Let's not forget, and I'll bring this up with Chris when he comes back. We have got a huge CME that is on its way and arriving tonight here, hitting planet Earth. So there could be all kinds of disturbances that are going on right now. Okay, so there's no reason to panic and no reason to freak out. But the announcement that came in earlier today, which I did in a press release, was that we can expect 10 to 20 to 30 minutes of transmission interruptions with satellites and high frequency radio communications. So, and it's a class 2. I think it was a G2 that is hitting us tonight. And so we're talking about satellite interference here, and that's could be exactly what is going on. So I'm not freaking out. And also, it's also very strange that we had no issues, none until right now. So Chris, same thing. This is what I'm seeing. Talk to me. Let me see if I've at least got your voice. And I do not. Okay. So Chris, if you can hear me, just back out and come back in. Yeah. Not that big of a deal. Do I look like I'm freaking out? I am not. Yeah, the CME from today, I'll just pull this up for everybody. This is the announcement that was released today, and it's called a filament eruption, and it started 2 days ago. And let me pull this back. Okay, so a filament, and I had never heard this description before, but that's what this is apparently. And it is let me pull it up. Sorry, when I change screens, my scroll changes position. So the CME is expected to hit Earth from now until early in the morning, and it may cause extensive auroras. This could be good news for aurora chasers, by the way. The CME arrives, if it does as anticipated, it could trigger a geomagnetic storm similar to the one on September 12th. The predicted G2 storm for tonight and tomorrow could trigger extensive displays and result in a limited blackout of high-frequency radio communication with satellites on the sunlit side and possible loss of radio contact for up to tens of minutes. Yes, auroras in Colorado. So that's it could be what we're dealing with right now. And stuff like this happens. And normally, I could move Chris to Friday, but I've got a show on Friday. So, yeah. And I would hate for that to be the case. And let me see. And next week is fully booked too as well. On the 25th, on Monday, I've got an Ancient Aliens night here. I've got David Hatcher Childress. That's right. I've got Nick Pope, and I've got William Henry, all on Monday night. So I'm going to do an Ancient Alien thing on Monday night. And then Tuesday night, I've got UFO whistleblower Mike Herrera on the show. And yeah. And then on Wednesday night, I've got Caroline Corey and Sarah Breskman Cosme on the show, all at the same time. They're going to be on 1 hour each. And then next Thursday, I've got Randall Carlson on the show. So I've got a full week next week. So I can't even move Chris to next week unless I do Chris next Friday. Man. And then this week on the show, tomorrow night, I've got Joshua Cutchin on the show finally. We're going to be talking about UFOs and folklore and fairy folklore. And then on Wednesday night, I've got Kathleen Ball here. We're going to be talking about her book about the Knights Templar in Brazil. And Thursday night, Linda Moulton Howe is here. And then, of course, Friday night, Melissa Tittle. We're going to be doing the Peruvian mummy. So, yeah, we've got a very, very, very busy week this week. Okay, Chris, let's see if this works. I don't know what's going on. Chris is back, but I've got the same thing. I've got a blank screen. Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. He can come in, but he can't. And I don't have a solution. Yeah. So there you go. I am going to take a break. Let's go ahead and do that, and we will see if we get Chris back in here during the break. All right. I'll be right back. Stay with me. This is Fade to Black. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Please visit all of our sponsors. We're taking a quick break here. All of the links are below. We'll be right back. Join us November 10th, 11th, and 12th, 2023, live at the Luxor Hotel and Casino on the Las Vegas Strip, as Disclosure Fest Foundation and Fade to Black Radio presents Stairway to the Stars, a Human Origins Science and Technology Expo, with live talks, lectures, and workshops by world-acclaimed researchers and authors, featuring topics like human origins, ancient technologies, indigenous teachings, workshops, a mass meditation, yoga and sound healing, music, and so much more. This is Jimmy Church, by the way, and I'll be your host all weekend long. Don't miss our intimate sky watch and meteor shower over the infamous Area 51 airspace in Rachel, Nevada, with special surprise celebrity hosts guiding us through the night. This event will sell out. For more information and tickets, please visit disclosurefest.org. Hi, everybody. Jimmy Church here. Very special announcement, and that is we are shipping Fade to Black t-shirts again. It's been almost 2 years. We did a full upgrade to the website, so you can head over to jimmychurchradio.com. It's all simple to do, and it's right there. Remember, we broadcast 4 nights a week, Monday through Thursday. We bring you the best, the brightest, the most knowledgeable and amazing guests, the best conversations. We do that 4 nights a week. We also do 4 days a week. We broadcast the news, and we do that live too as well. It's not a one-man show. I do it with website support. I do it with producers. I do it with writers and artists. All contribute to the show. The best way to help support what we do here is with the Fade to Black t-shirt. And you can get your Fade to Black t-shirt one of 2 ways. First, go to jimmychurchradio.com, order a shirt. It's really that simple. You're going to get a tracking number, it's going to get shipped, and it's going to get autographed. The second way to get a shirt is with a Game Changer membership. Now, the Game Changer membership not only includes a free t-shirt, but you get a private email to me. You get unlimited commercial-free downloads. You have full access to the website, and everything includes free shipping, and everything is autographed. So help support the show. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. The links are below. You can just go to jimmychurchradio.com, and it's right on the website. So there you go. I'm Jimmy Church, Fade to Black. I'm so excited that I just have one thing to say. Go Beckley Teppy. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right, everybody, welcome back. We don't have Chris Dunn. He has not been able to get to his his connection established, and I am really bummed about this. So let's see what happens in the next few minutes. We just did an AMA. I don't want to turn around and do another AMA if I don't have to tonight. But the show must go on, and so maybe we'll do that, and we'll bust a move and do an impromptu AMA fader night tonight. We'll just keep this going, maybe for a little bit. I'm watching. Chris came and went a couple of times, but didn't have a video established. So I don't know. I used to, back in the day, freak out. Man, I would just freak out, man. I would freak out. If there was technical issues, you didn't see it on the screen, but I was breaking stuff and just frustrated, and because I'm so excited about doing the show. And it just became so normal. How do I say this? It's just par for the course. Okay, so Chris is trying to reset. I'm watching him. He is back with us, but again, I'll just let everybody know this is what I've got on my screen. So he's here. He's trying to establish the connection. It's just not happening. So, man, having a weird hair day. I wanted to, while I'm watching Chris reset, I just went this weekend to shoot Into the Vortex season 2. And it was so much fun to do. And I got to sit down with Danny Sheehan, and Danny had just gotten in from, I'll let everybody know, he just got back in from Washington, D.C. That night. We go straight into the studio that day, and I just cannot wait for all of you to check that out. There are some images that have been posted on the internet, so this isn't some secret thing, or anything like that. So I had Danny Sheehan in the studio. I also had Mike Herrera, the UFO whistleblower. Very exclusive interview, and I was able to sit with Mike for a couple of days and talk to him, and I've talked to him since. And now we are going to have him on Fade to Black next week, and this is a very, very, very important to have whistleblowers start to come forward. And one of the things that Mike said, and we will talk about this next week, that it was the Gillibrand amendment that went into last year's NDAA that made him feel comfortable enough to go ahead and come forward and start revealing things. Now, we'll be talking about all of that next week. He's a very smart, very, very intelligent guy that he's got his military background, but it's what he is doing today. He's very, very smart, and you are really going to enjoy this conversation. But and that's going to go down next week. But I got to hang out with him this weekend, and also Andrew Goff. And Andrew, who lives in England, he's from the United States. He's an American, but he lives in England now, and he is chasing down Templar and Solomon's temple evidence and artifacts, and is excavating right now. And so that was very interesting. That this weekend. And then to top it off, I got to hang out with Matthew James Bailey. Now, Matthew James Bailey was on Fade to Black last year. A very, very smart, interesting guy. And when it comes to artificial intelligence and the ethics of that, that's what we did the last show on with Matthew. But where he is today with the codes of creation, and how this transition has happened with him, because he's an intellectual. That was very interesting too, as well. So I went through all of that this weekend, and it was such a moment of knowledge and breakthrough for me, right? Where I come out of the other side. Now, just put yourself in my position for a second, where I am able to do what you do every night. You come in, you listen to Fade to Black, and you're hearing an interview go down and evidence being presented and all of that. You're learning is right beside me. And that's what I did this weekend. So I come off of all of that, and I'm just in a great mood. We had an amazing dinner after the shoot. And on Saturday morning, I go to a private airport to fly out. And while I'm there, so I go through. It's small. It's a small airport. I don't want to get into the details of that, but so it's not a big terminal or anything. So I'm able to just walk through and go out to the runway. And I'm by myself, and I have a coffee, and I walk out, and in front of me, and you've seen the videos. I posted them on Facebook, and I did a live stream too as well. I walk out. This was my weekend, and it was only Saturday by this point. I still had the weekend in front of me. I walk out, and in front of me are right in front of me, like this close, 4 Marine Ospreys. 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're sitting there. And I'm like, wow, that's a weird thing in a private airport. And I walk up, and I'm looking at the flight crews, and I said, hello to everybody. They're right there, right in front of me. And I just kind of walk down, and I'm looking at these things, and then they start to fire up. And I'm like, man, are these things going to fly in front of me? Right in front of me? And this is what happens. Some of it, now I shot a lot of video that hasn't been posted. One video posted, plus I did the live streams. But this is what happens. These frigging things, and what you don't, when you see them in the sky, you don't realize how big they are. They're actually very big. And the props are ginormous, and they're thick, and they're wide, and they're big. They're not like helicopter blades. These are different. And you're looking, they're so mechanical. They're so intimidating. And so anyway, so I'm standing there, and I hear that jet engines start to fire up. And those are whining. The props aren't, and they're testing, and they're moving, and they're tilting. And what I noticed is that they were all in sync. Yeah, that was pretty trippy to see this. So there's 4 of them, and they're all communicating. Okay, so this is what happens. So I'm standing there, and I'm taking pictures, and we got Chris back. Okay, we got Chris back. See, okay. So and then I'll just end this really quick so I can get Chris in. These things fire up, and the blades, and the volume, and the thing, and the wind, and the dust, and the rocks, and the debris. And I'm standing this close to them, and I'm like, this is absolutely nuts. And it was the craziest way to cap off the past couple of days. It was just an amazing weekend. So, okay, Chris, we got you back.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
All right. So the question was, and I stretched this out. I'm telling stories now about the weekend and feeding my hummingbirds. That's where I was at. I'm just like stretching this out. The question was, before it froze up, have you ever thought about throwing in the towel because of outside pressure about your revelations and theories about the Great Pyramid?
Yeah, I actually decided that I would retire and basically do other stuff for about a decade. And it was after Lost Technologies of Ancient Egypt was published, and I went through some serious health issues. So I had in 2015, I had cancer. 2016, I had triple bypass. Then 17, I had stomach cancer and had most of my stomach taken out. So It was quite a decade, and one where, as I had kind of retired from the scene, uh, there was a huge swell of interest and activity on the whole lost technologies aspect of my research. And so I was watching all this activity going on, and I'm like, wow, that's really great. That's what I wanted, for more people to connect with it and study it themselves. And one of the things that uh, I'm really pleased about is that in my book, I actually made a plea to Egyptian engineers to look at the artifacts that I'd identified in my book as being the products of advanced manufacturing, because they displayed a high level of precision, that sophisticated geometry and symmetry. And so a young man named Ahmed Adli, who's an Egyptian engineer, did just that. And so he started to study the artifacts that I'd identified, and he actually wrote the foreword for my next book. And in that foreword, what he described was his experiment, or his inspection of the granite boxes in the Serapeum. Did you happen to go to the Serapeum while you were over there, Jimmy?
I did.
Yeah.
I still, I want you to continue, but the different sites there, and everyone's got, its own story and its magnificence.
Right.
But the Serapeum is one of the most mind-blowing things that you can, and for thousands of reasons, Chris. It's not just one. It's immense. It's huge. The granite boxes that are in there, and the placement and how they were done, that's a whole, and its precision, that's a whole nother discussion. But let me tell you what blew my mind the most, and it's kind of esoteric, it's kind of weird. But when you come back out of, because when you're down there and you're walking through these tunnels, and it's like the biggest shopping center that you've ever been in, right? It's like that big, the hallways, the height, the thing. It's like storefronts, right? Florsham shoes, right? And Orange Julius, and these different storefronts, if you will. Okay.
Right.
And you come back out of that and you go back to the surface, and you just kind of turn around and look, and you're looking at sand dunes, and you're thinking to yourself, at least for me, what else is under there? Because it's ginormous, and it's covered in sand, and it's hidden by sand. And what else could possibly be there throughout Egypt, right? And if the British hadn't discovered it when they did in 1817, or whenever those first drawings surfaced with that, we might have never known that it existed.
Right. Yeah. I think it was August Mariette who did the first kind of Egyptological study of the Serapeum, but it was a site that I'd never heard of before when I first went to Egypt, which my first time was in 1986. I never heard of it. I found out about it in 1995 when I went to Egypt at the request of Graham Hancock and Robert Baval. They were filming a production with Netherlands television. And so they wanted me to talk about my article, Advanced Machining in Ancient Egypt. And the focus of the interview was in the King's Chamber, behind the granite box. So that was my first time on camera in Egypt. Was in 1995. And it was a couple of days later, and they were going around to different sites. I had fulfilled my obligation, and they were going around to different sites. And one day they were filming in the Serapeum, and so I met a man from Canada. His name was Robert McKenty, and he suggested that we drive out to Saqqara and see if we can actually go into the Serapeum and look for it and look at the artifacts there. I had never heard of it, never seen it. And I thought, okay, let's go look at it. And we went in, I went down into the tunnels, and it was just totally mind-bending for me. I was looking at these huge granite boxes. I mean, to understand the enormity of it, the boxes and the lids would weigh about 100 tons, and the boxes are cut out of solid granite. I mean, it's like a single piece of granite. It's not made up in pieces, like 5 pieces bolted together. It's carved out of solid granite. And so I had a brief visit because of other activities, and the fact that the place is closed and it's forbidden to go in there. Obviously, Netherlands Television had permission to do their filming there, but I'd taken a couple of tools with me, precision straight edge and radius gauges. So I jumped down into one of these crypts, and this is one of the most fascinating things about the Serapeum is you have these giant boxes. They're about 13 feet long, about 7.5 feet wide, and 8 feet high, and they're set in these crypts that are the floor of the crypt is about 4 feet more below the level of the tunnel floor. And that was always a mystery to me. Why would they bring these boxes in, heavy? I mean, just the boxes themselves probably weighed 70 tons or more, and actually getting them into and then dropping them down into this recess, this so-called crypt. But the other part to it that was fascinating to me was that they were set in a recess in the floor of the crypt. So there's kind of like just like a recess in the floor, so that the box would not, if you slid it horizontally, along, you won't be able to move it more than about a half an inch or so. And that was fascinating to me. So all of these different peculiar conditions that I found was it was like a mystery. And then, but the real significant find that I had was when I applied my straight edge to the surface of the granite. And I've worked in manufacturing, like you introduced me, for 52 years, and a lot of that, 25 of those years, I worked on the shop floor, and so I'm very familiar with precision tools and very familiar with the granite surface plates and gauges that actually slid along a granite surface plate.
Yeah, and let me ask you about that for a second, if I may, because sure. that documentary is a fascinating one. And watching you whip out, you smuggled in a couple of tools into Egypt, right? So you bring in one of them was a metal straight edge, right? Perfectly straight. And you whip that thing out throughout this whole documentary. You're walking up to every surface you can, pop, 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 right? It's one of the best parts of the documentary, was you doing this repeatedly at different sites, and what you did inside of the Serapeum was remarkable. And let me ask you about that. As a machinist, when you see this over and over again, you did this on the Giza Plateau, right? You went up to different blocks right there on the plateau. You did it in the King's Chamber. Now you're over in Saqqara. You're at the Serapeum, down with these massive blocks. What's going through your mind as an engineer and as a machinist, seeing something that is 2, 3, 4,000, 5,000 years old, perfectly smooth, like the top of a pool table?
Right. I mean, what was going through my mind was there is absolutely nothing in the archaeological record that is capable of creating those artifacts. The conventional Egyptology describes methods that include copper tubes, stone chisels, dolerite pounders to hollow out these boxes, and then be able to bring them to a level of precision that would require a range of sophisticated metrology instruments to actually control the dimensions that they eventually achieved. And there is one photograph, it's on my website, of me inside one of these boxes, and I have a 14-inch toolmaker square that's very precise, very calibrated, and I had it on on the underside of the lid with the blade running down the inside of the box, and it's mind-blowing. The gauge was very precise. It was a comparative check. And so when I wrote my book, I stressed that they needed more sophisticated analysis, and that perhaps laser scanning or structured light scanning to determine their true accuracy, and to be able to map the entire inside and analyze it in a computer. But like we do today in manufacturing, we use structured light, or sometimes CAT scanning or laser scanning to determine conformity to customer specifications in terms of geometry and precision, and the tolerance that you're allowed to deviate from a true form or a perfect form. So all of that is going through my mind, because
one other quick question, and I'm sorry for the interruption, but I don't want this to get past us. So you've got a metal machinist square, right? And you're running that down inside of the corner. I can understand. I can sort of understand on the outside of the box with a diorite ball pounding that thing for 100 years with 1,000 slaves, right? And getting a corner on the outside, eventually pounding this thing down into a corner. But when you're on the inside of the box and you're doing a corner from the inside to get a perfect corner all the way down, you're not doing that with a diorite ball, and you're not doing that with chicken bones.
No.
Right, and you're not doing that with a copper chisel, and in some cases, this was done before there was even any metallurgy. Right,
it's impossible.
It's impossible, right?
It is absolutely impossible. The other point that I'd like to make is that I had two images, one of me on one side of the box with that square, and the other photograph on the other side of the box with the same square, doing the same comparative check, and the same condition is on both sides. So essentially what that means is that the inside surfaces, and I'm talking not vertically and horizontal precision, and the surfaces are perfectly parallel to each other. Now, when I say perfectly parallel, people quibble about what perfect is. You can't say perfect. Well, we use it all the time in manufacturing. How's that part? How's it look? Oh, it's perfect. It may be out a few thousands, but it conforms to the manufacturer's requirements, and so generally say, hey, this is a perfect part. But still, it's really funny because when you start to get pushback from debunkers, and you say, well, you can't say that that's perfect. That's maybe 2 thousandths out, or it may be this out. And one guy in a discussion said, well, it's been there for like 5,000 years, and there's probably verdigris built up on the surface, and how do you accommodate for that? And I asked him the question. I said, well, if there is verdigris on the inside surface or on any surface, to what thickness would you estimate that verdigris would be? How would it change the dimension of the box? And he said, well, it could be a half a thousandth of verdigris on it, which is just a guess, just a bullshit guess, really.
Right.
And so I said, well, okay. So if you have a surface that is flat to within 1,000th of an inch, and you add to that a half thousandth of verdigris, then how flat is it? I mean, this is how crazy people get.
You know what my answer is?
Yeah, well,
pretty damn flat.
It's pretty damn flat.
It's pretty damn flat.
Yeah, it's kind of like well, I worked to high precision. I've worked to those tolerances, and I've used those straight edges and squares. Actually, a part of my apprenticeship when I was in England, we had to make our own tool sets, and the squares, V blocks, G clamps, all kinds of different things, and we had to make them by hand, right? So as far as having some knowledge ingrained in you at an early age, when I entered the shops when I was 15 years old, that basically that encoded my DNA that stayed with me for the rest of my life, and it's almost like second nature to me. When I look at an object, and I always ask the question, how did they make it?
How? One thing that I've seen twice now, and I want your comment on this. You can laugh first, and then you can comment. I've seen this twice. Once at the Met in New York, which has got a great, one of the best Egyptian displays. Like half of the museum is Egyptian. It's incredible. And I've seen it in the new History Museum of Egypt that just opened last year. Okay, same thing twice in two different museums. Red granite stela. Okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yay big. Your typical stela, round top, 4 inches thick, probably weighs a couple of 100 pounds. Tiny hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics are when they're engraved. Hieroglyphs are the writing itself. So these are hieroglyphic, engraved, tiny, right? Like this big, just billions of words and things, right? Filling up the stela. Tiny, right? Tiny. And then down at the bottom is a little copper needle, right? It's a copper needle. And then you read, this stela was carved with this tool. And you're looking down and you're looking at this and you're looking at it. No, it wasn't. That copper needle did not engrave that red granite. And it's precise. And you've seen what I'm talking about. So I go to eat and I see the same claims in Egypt.
Right.
No. I don't know how they did it, Chris. but they didn't make it with that copper needle. It simply didn't happen. But they're going to stick to their story, aren't they?
Well, they seem to be in the West. They seem to be adhering to the conventional model that's been around for over 100 years, and and essentially priority is given to the context and the archaeological record. So those are the limits within which they work. If it's not in the archaeological record, then it didn't exist, and we can't introduce it into the analysis of how they produce these miracles of engineering, and and so that seems to be like a roadblock for them. They've defined their parameters, and they're staying within them, and they're not going to change them. Things are changing though in Egypt, and Ahmed Adli has been very instrumental in changing people's minds in Egypt. They're now abandoning the whole pyramid as tomb theory. I don't think the main guy or the most well-known Egyptologist from Egypt, Zahi Hawass, I'm not sure if he has changed his mind, but I know that there are a lot of professionals in Egypt, young people especially, are now really switched on to this lost technology aspect, and even some scientists and physicists are now supporting the pyramid as a machine hypothesis that I forwarded in the Giza Power Plant.
Yeah,
So,
that book changed things. And let me ask you this. And I feel like I just interrupted you, Chris, and I apologize, but
all right.
okay.
Yeah.
It's when, and I was talking about this earlier, when you visit all of these sites in Egypt, some of them are powerfully spiritual. You cannot help but to be affected. And I get that, right? It happened to me. It didn't happen at every site. And it also happened when I least expected it, right? It just kind of sneaks up on you and smacks you upside the head and makes sure that you're paying attention. But so much attention has been put on the Great Pyramid, of myself included, right? I have very high expectations. I've read your stuff. I've read all of Robert Bauval's, and I've been studying this since I was a kid, and I didn't know what was going to happen. But I'll say this. You go through that entrance. I was by myself. I'm alone, right? Which is an extraordinary. You've been there. You know what it's like to arrange something like this. So I go through the tunnel by myself. The silence. Go up the shaft and come out into the Grand Gallery, which is beautiful. It's crazy. It's insane. But I got nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm looking up at it, and it felt, man, you've said this so many times in your books and your things, but I'm just going to say it. It felt mechanical. It looked mechanical. There's a purpose. I don't know what it is, but it had nothing to do with the afterlife. There wasn't a feeling of spirituality there. It was mechanical. Did you have that same feeling when you gazed up into the Grand Gallery for the first time?
Yeah, when I first went in '86, I was kind of concerned that what I would find in there would kind of throw me off the horse and totally negate everything that every perception that I had going in. But it was an interesting experience for me, and there's a lot of people who have different experiences when they go into the Great Pyramid, and a lot of people have contacted me and said that it felt industrial and it felt like a machine. The interesting thing, though, to the point that you were making about the Grand Gallery, seeming flat, or it was not
lifeless.
lifeless, not energetic. The there's a good reason for that, and it involves acoustics. There was a flautist. His name was Paul Horn. I don't know if you remember him. He had recorded his flute in several what they call sacred places. The Taj Mahal, and one of his albums is called Inside the Great Pyramid. And accompanying the album, he was relating his experience on the inside of the Great Pyramid before he recorded his music. And he noted that in the King's Chamber, the reverberation was immense. I mean, the Q factor in that place is very high. And but then he noted that when he went out into the Grand Gallery and played his flute at the top of the Grand Gallery on the Great Step, as it's called, it was flat. It seemed very flat in there. So he noted, though, that there was a sound coming from somewhere else, and it was coming from behind him. And the music was going out into the Grand Gallery, and because of the different angles and the way the Grand Gallery is shaped, the sound was bouncing around and focused towards the King's Chamber, and the King's Chamber was served almost like a Helmholtz resonator and was vibrating with the sound, or it was receiving the sound and it was being powered by it. The interesting thing on that is I was there when I was there in '95. I took an RF counter with me, and also a tuner. I had a cheap old guitar tuner. I wanted to check the frequency of the chamber, and then a tape recorder. And I paid the guard money to leave me on the inside of the Great Pyramid all alone, and to turn the lights off, because I wanted to see if I could detect any RF coming from the granite.
You stood in the dark? You had the lights turned off?
Yeah.
You're insane. You're crazy. You're crazy. That's nuts, man. That's nuts. Okay, so anyway, so you got your guitar tuner, you got your RF meter. What happened?
Right. So then the lights weren't being turned off, and so I walked. I was by the coffer, the box, and I walked to that horizontal passage that comes into the King's Chamber, and I crawled along, to the Grand Gallery and yelled down to the guard to turn the lights off, and then rushed back into the King's Chamber before the lights were turned off, and I was stumbling around in the dark. But I had my flashlight with me anyway. But the sad thing was at that time was that the lights were turned off, but the fans were on a different circuit, and they were continued to run. And the reason why I wanted the lights turned off was to eliminate any electromagnetic radiation that would be, So
and the fans. You have to have if those fans would have turned off, you might not have made it out of there.
Why not? Of course,
the oxygen. You need to stir that. I thought about that inside of a lot of the different monuments there.
Those fans weren't installed until 1993.
I don't know how people did it. I know
they weren't in there. They weren't in there the first time I went into the Great Pyramid, and I took photographs.
The bent pyramid's the same way too, as well. It's not ventilated, and man,
it's
rough. It's
rough.
rough.
You get pretty. You can work up a sweat, that's for sure.
And now, okay, so let me ask you this really quick, and then let's get back to this, the resonance. I'm very interested in that. I've got guitar tuners. I've got a couple of guitars, Chris, and so
I see that.
I'm yeah, I'm interested in resonance and frequency. So let's get back to that. But there's the Muon experiment and testing that went on with the Great Pyramid. You mentioned Zahi Hawass, who says there's nothing to see here, move on. There's nothing else inside of the Great Pyramid. Well, now, and the new tomography that has been done as well, in addition to the Muon, is showing all kinds of stuff inside of the Great Pyramid that's yet to be discovered. We've got the new chamber above the Grand Gallery, which is enormous. And then on the outside, the entrance, right, with the gabled granite blocks. Behind that, apparently, is another chamber at the end of that hallway that is sealed off that they have found. What do you make of that? And is this supporting your theories behind the power plant?
Yes. The the void, or the big void above the Grand Gallery. I had a friend. He's an aerospace engineer. His name's Eric Wilson, and he called me one day, and I was with Bob Vorder, my research associate, who is a sound engineer, and so I get a call from Eric, and he says, "Hey, about that big void," and I said, "Yeah, what?" He said, "Well, I think I know what it is," and he said, and I said, "Well, okay, tell me." And he said, "Well, in your book, when you describe the King's Chamber or the pyramid as a maser, which produces microwave output, and with the north shaft in the King's Chamber being a waveguide for the input signal," said, "You know, I thought that it wouldn't work without a preamp, and that void would serve very well as a preamp. And now that's depending on what is found, if they are ever able to penetrate it, or get further information from it." And so I was like, "Well, that's good news." But not every space has a high-tech purpose. The one behind the chevrons over the original entrance to the descending passage, that could have a very simple explanation, in my opinion. I don't think there's anything mysterious about it. So anyway, the void that Eric, could have served as a preamp, that fit into my theory. And then I started to say, well, I'm going to organize a Lost Technologies tour and see if we can attract some talent to come on the tour. So Bob Vorder and I hosted the tour with Mohammed Ibrahim. I don't know if you know him, tour guide.
I was just with him in Manchester last week.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I'm going to see Mohammed next week and for this tour, but okay, let me just say this before we move on, because these chambers and what's going on with this, I think, is extraordinary. But Mohammed, Egypt, you described him perfectly earlier. He is what Egyptology needs more of. There's too much of the dogma, right? You're just reading off of there's too much of that. And when you go on when you go on a tour there, Chris, and you've done this, and so you know what I'm talking about. You see all these tour groups, and you see the employees of Egypt that are tour guides, and they go through their classes, and it's their job, and they're all reading from the same blue folder, right? They've all got the same stuff, and they're reading, and the people there going on the tour, good on them, right? They're there, they're doing their tour, but they're listening to the it's and you can hear it. You can hear this tour guide and this tour guide reading from the exact same pages at the same moment in the Valley of the Kings or the Giza Plant, wherever you are. And that Muhammad is not that. And there are a few guides over there that are extremely educated that think outside of the box. And that's to your point. We need more Muhammad Ibrahims.
Well, I'll tell you about Muhammad. In 2019, 2019, I did another tour with Muhammad. And you know that square that you see in the Serapeum and the straight edge? I said, because Muhammad was telling me that so many engineers and technically inclined people are now going to Egypt to look at these artifacts, and some of them are taking my book with them and going and checking out the artifacts that I describe in my book. There's so many of them, and they're all pretty much disagreeing with the conventional theories, and so and Muhammad said, what I would like to do is educate my fellow tour guides and start explaining to them how advanced those artifacts are and how they cannot be made using primitive methods. And so I left my instruments with him, and he used them to educate a lot of fellow tour guides, take them out and show them and explain to them. And so that started to spread, and now it's going like wildfire. There's a revolution of thought in Egypt now.
I agree with you. I wanted to show you this. I'm going to hold this up. This was last week in the UK. I'm going to hold this up. That's me and Muhammad sitting doing a panel together, and I took this selfie. And so there's Muhammad and I, and we're just laughing. And but I said to Muhammad, we were taking questions from the audience, and I said, I'm just going to let everybody know I'm sitting next to Muhammad Ibrahim, and I'm smarter now. Oh man, he's the best. He's the absolute best. And now, what do you think is the next step? Because if things continue like they are, where Zahi Hawass, and you're right, he's got himself painted in the corner, and he's in a difficult position where he may not be able to get back out of it. He's aggressively fought, thinking outside of the box for so long. But the younger generation is starting to realize, hey, you know what? There's more questions here than we have answers for. So let's go ahead and pursue this. And that's what that's what Zahi's got himself up against now. He's trained so many Egyptologists, but they're starting to find out, hey, wait a minute. No, there's something else going on here. And that's the future. And I feel good about it.
Yeah, and I think that, the whole saw, like you have to follow the money, and there was a lot of money in Egyptology.
Yes,
contracts with different countries, the different missions to do archaeological digs and all that.
TV networks,
right?
Yeah.
Now they're seeing thousands of people coming over looking for lost technologies, and running really huge tours, and so I think they are now saying this has more value than the conventional model that we've been teaching, and they're changing their mind. Not only that, I mean, can you imagine? You've been taught that you are like on the there's a linear history, development of civilization, and Egypt's always been the low man on the totem pole, right? You go from Egypt to the Greeks, the Romans, then Europeans, etc., etc. But but now somebody's coming along and saying, no, you were way more advanced than the Greeks. You were way more advanced than the Romans, and in many ways more advanced than the Europeans, and in some ways more advanced than any modern technology, if you consider what the implications of what they were doing, which was incredible. You can't deny it now.
No, you
It's
can't.
staring them in the face.
That's right. That's right. And if you know what, if you just go with the numbers that orthodox academia presents to us, right? So let's just go with their numbers, Chris. Okay, they're wrong, but let's just go with their numbers for a second. If we go with 3000 BC, okay, when we start there with the Giza Plateau, their numbers, not ours, but 3000 BC. Greece didn't happen. Greece for another 2,400 years. That's 2,000, right? And Rome didn't happen for 200 years after that. That's how advanced we are talking about here. And the Parthenon is awesome. The Colosseum is awesome, but that's all modern history. Those were built last week compared to what the Egyptians were doing allegedly around 3000 BC, probably much older than that.
Well, Jimmy, the Greeks went to Egypt and studied. Pythagoras was supposed to have studied in the Egyptian mystery schools. And when you look at the geometry and the architecture in Egypt, the way I did, taking very good photographs and then analyzing them in my CAD program, you find that they are applying different geometric constructs that were supposedly weren't introduced or weren't thought about until 300 AD in Greece, such as the ellipse. What wasn't supposed to? I mean, we didn't know it until just after 300 AD. So, and then the Pythagoras is Pythagorean triangle. That was supposedly was not invented until Pythagoras, right? I mean, he was the first. Right. He's got his name on it. But you find the Pythagorean triangle in the architecture in Egypt. You find ellipses and ellipsoids all over the place. All over. I mean, I could probably talk for another 2 hours just on the application of ellipses and how they used them in their architecture. But I don't want to talk for 2 hours on that.
No, you can, and you shall, and let me tell you why that blows my mind. It's one thing, and again, you can laugh, Chris. I'm here all week. Try to be okay. Is this? You can have an ellipse, a half of an ellipse on something, and it's pretty cool.
Right.
It's when you flip it over and duplicate it and make it symmetrical 5,000 years ago. That's the part that nobody has an answer for, do they?
Or even earlier. Yeah. I mean, most of the white crowns in Egypt of the statues, such as the Hedjet, the Shrant, and basically the head. Did I say Hedjet? Yeah, they have what you might call modified ellipsoids, and so that the ellipsoid is a solid, right? It's a little more complicated and more involved than just drawing an ellipse on a piece of paper.
That's right.
And so, the just the fact that they knew of the ellipse, they applied it in their architecture, and then they created massive 3-dimensional granite objects that clearly show that they are ellipses, that or at least there are sections of ellipsoids. It's mind-blowing when you really consider the implications of that.
Yeah,
And
a circle, a circle, a radius. There are things that I can explain that away. A stick with a string. Okay, we can do circles. We can. All right, I can appreciate that. When you get into ellipses, that's
right.
a whole nother level of math and engineering. That's taking it way beyond, and then to replicate it, and to make it symmetrical, and to flip it, and to make it 3D, and to make it solid. That's a whole nother level. And you can't tell me, that's the skeptics and the debunkers. You can't tell me that Stone Age man just walked out of the desert one night and started doing this stuff the next day. It doesn't work like that, does it?
No, it doesn't. No, I mean, it is a reflection of the development of an industry that had very sophisticated mathematics, also geometry, and sophisticated tools in order to be able to create them. I mean,
now, would you suggest some kind of industrial diamond edged power tools? Look, I don't want to put words in your mouth or anything, but it had to have gotten done somehow, and it wasn't done rubbing sand with cloth, right? That's not how this happens, is it?
No,
Yeah,
it
I
is
love
not.
the way you laugh.
No, you told me not to laugh. I'm sorry. I can't help myself. No, yeah, it boggles the mind, when you consider there are very, very minute, nuanced, subtle aspects and marks that appear that signify a particular process, whether that is objects being turned on a lathe or cut on a 3-axis milling machine, or but some kind of the mechanical assistance to create these sophisticated artifacts. And the marks that they leave, I mean, they leave a signature. And if you're able to read those marks, then you can determine to some degree what the tool may have looked like, and then depending on the geometry and the precision, whether it was possible to guide that tool manually, or if you needed mechanical assistance. And basically, when I started my inquiry, it was to consider the minimum technologies that would have been necessary. And what I've learned in the last year or so is that my perception of how sophisticated they were was very, very conservative. And the introduction of new evidence of late shows that they had to have used computer software like CAD/CAM and high precision machines. And when you start to consider those concepts, then you're asking the question about, well, what what is the metrology? But I mean, metrology is a huge, huge issue. It is what maintains our civilization.
Hmm.
It is what maintains our safety. So if you get on an airplane and you are surrounded by very precise artifacts that have highly controlled inspection and
Extreme
metrology
tolerances. Yeah,
industry,
extreme
extreme
tolerance.
tolerances. Yeah,
Right, right, right.
depending on the object, like in an engine, you would have the precision, very very high precision to a medium, like maybe a few microns to maybe the thickness of a thumbnail on the contour of an airfoil or something like that. But on most of the objects, the precision is extremely high, and it's also tightly controlled. So
And we see the same precision all over Egypt and on the Giza Plateau. That's the trippy
right,
part.
right, and so
Yeah, we can
they are
accept.
really they're really
Go
what
ahead, Chris.
you might consider them to be out of place artifacts for sure. And
There's
I was in Egypt with John Anthony West in 2006, and he always had a good analogy for things. And when he talks about the precise artifacts found in Egypt, it's kind of like he says it's finding a Porsche where there should only be a horse and cart.
right. Man, I miss him so much. When I would have him on the show, Chris, you'll love this. So we're doing the interview, he's many times, I love that guy. But anyway, I could hear in the background him stirring his vodka in a tumbler with the ice cubes, right? I would hear it tinkling in the background. I love that guy. Man had style. He had style. I wanted to ask you this though. I don't want this. I've always wanted to ask you about this. In that original video, right? So you are walking around the plateau and you come across a granite block with a hole and you find the plug. And you know the scene that I'm talking about, right? And you hold up the plug that came out of this hole, right? You hold this up and you're looking at the spiral on the outside, and you're looking at and it's a pink granite block, and you've got what was removed, and it's precise, it's beautiful, it's elegant, and it makes no sense how that came out of that block. And because you're a modern engineer, how difficult that is to pull off. And there it is, just sitting on the ground next to the hole.
Yeah,
Your mechanical mind, what went through your mind when you see something like this?
The person who actually found that, it was William Flinders Petrie, and he found it in the late 1880s. It's a granite core that was removed from a hole, and it showed that the feed rate of the drill was 100 thousandths per revolution of the drill. And so he noted that in his book, Pyramids and Temples of Giza. He was Britain's first Egyptologist, and very prolific researcher and writer. But his work is what started me off on the whole machining aspect, and I studied that core, or at least his account of it, and he had some sketches in his book. And so I tried to figure out how they would have cut that using modern technology. And so I was like, well, first of all, I need to find out what the penetration rate of a modern drill is in granite today. And this was back in, oh man, this was back in 1982, 83, something like that. And so I called a granite manufacturing company that they made surface plates and other granite objects with precision. And generally, it was common that they would drill holes in granite. And I asked them, I sent them a letter. Back in those days, you didn't have internet. I couldn't send them an email. And so sent him a letter and asked what the penetration rate was for a modern drill in granite. And so he came back and said, well, we penetrate a rate of about 2/10,000ths of an inch per revolution. And 2/10,000ths of an inch per revolution. And
That's
if
not much.
you can
That's not much.
multiply that number by 500 to achieve the ancient Egyptian penetration rate.
With the diamond tipped turbine.
Yes, yeah. You're not going to drill it with anything else. It's going to be diamond. And so yes. And so then I was like, well, what method were they using? And so I tried to figure it out. And eventually I came up with the idea that there was a method that we used in metal manufacturing. It's called EDM, electrical discharge machining. And so I actually, been around or witnessed where they have cut threads into hardened steel using electrical discharge. And basically what that is, it's like a controlled short between a graphite rod or a copper rod that it penetrates into the metal, and it essentially just burns the material off. But it does it very in very minute amounts and high cycles per second. So you don't get, like if you stick a screwdriver into a light socket, you're gonna see the off-plating of material out on your screwdriver. You'll have a hole in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's similar to that, except it's very, very fine. And by rotating a rod that has a thread on it, you can penetrate into hard steel just by rotating that threaded rod into the material, and then the shape of the rod will be reflected in the hardened steel. So it's a non-conventional way of machining that you won't be able to drill and tap a hard steel with just conventional methods. So that's one way. They do it in carbide too, which is fairly significant.
Yeah,
So,
but this is in the now. This is modern technology with the assistance of years and years and years of one engineer teaching the other, right, and processes and mistakes, and of course computers and electronics, and then you have the chemical aspects of this, how different metals react with each other.
Right.
But this stuff wasn't going on 5,000 years ago, or was it? Right, and that's now. Let me ask you this.
But let me finish it, because I don't want to.
There's more. Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to leave it there, because somebody's got to say, wait a minute, you can't EDM a piece of granite. So, and it's right. So you don't use EDM on granite. The method that I proposed was ultrasonic, which is a vibratory process, and the tool was actually chipping away at the material, kind of like a jackhammer, except the the oscillations where the displacement of the tool was only about 1,000 instead of an inch or so. So thousandths of an inch. They a rapid vibration to erode the granite, and then it was advanced into the granite using a screw and nut
Now,
method.
how many vibrations? How many vibrations per second to do something like this?
Well, the ultrasonic
Right.
machining is up around 20,000 hertz.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
insane. That's
Yeah.
insane. That's insane. And now let me ask you about some conventional dating for a second. One of the ideas, and it's easy to see and very hard to ignore, is that all of the pharaohs made sure we knew their names. Okay, that's what they did, right? Their names are inscribed on everything except, right, the Great Pyramid. And I do take issue with that. Now, why do you think that is? Is it because I'm going to throw two ideas out? One, that they inherited the Great Pyramid. It was already there when Mene, right, when Narmer became the first pharaoh and dynastic Egypt kicked off at 3000 BC, that the pyramids were already there. And that's the first idea. The second one is it wasn't a tomb. Let's say it was built during the dynastic period, but it wasn't a tomb, and it wasn't religious, and it wasn't spiritual, and there wasn't a need to inscribe it with the pharaoh's name. Which way do you play?
Yeah, that's where things get a little muddy, because from my perspective, when looking at artifacts, I look at the engineering and the geometry and how they were made. What is applied later in terms of hieroglyphs and paint, or however it is altered in some way. That story is pretty much what I would call hearsay, in that unless you could receive testimony directly from the person who applied the hieroglyph or the image, and asked them, did you do this at the same time or immediately after this object was created, to see if it was actually applied at the same time? Because there's a lot of controversy about what they call the marks in the relieving chamber, so-called relieving chamber, up in the above the king's chamber. And there is a.
You're talking about the Colonel Weiss hoax.
Yes.
The
And
Weiss hoax.
there's controversy. There's the point of view that they were applied by Howard Weiss as a means to satisfy his patrons back home in England,
And his ego. And his ego.
Yeah, maybe, and that they were added later rather than originally. They're not original to the building. But Jimmy, it's like if you see a train car, a train going down the tracks, and you're looking at all these cars and the graffiti on the cars, right? Everybody's seen one. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. If you look at that graffiti and what's written, painted on the side of the cars, it has nothing to do with the function of the cars, it has nothing to do with the people who designed the cars and made the cars.
The age of the cars.
Oh, the age of the cars, right. Nothing to do with it whatsoever. So it's just muddies the water. And I tend to ignore it. I tell you the truth. And
Well, about the Vice discovery. This is the trippy thing. This is where I call BS on Howard Weiss. He's not with us anymore. I don't talk ill about the dead. But let me say this. All of the graffiti in the relieving chamber is on an exposed surface.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
Okay. There's nothing on there's nothing in between the stones. Right? There's nothing.
Right.
There's nothing. No. It's only on, and he was the one that blasted himself into there. And in his own notes, we can move on from Howard Weiss. He makes me angry. When he was first in there, Chris, with his assistant, in his own notes in his own journal, he doesn't mention it.
Yeah,
until much later. You would think that the first thing in that journal was, "Holy crap! I got up into the fifth layer of the receipt," and I'm looking around and I have got right. I've got Khufu everywhere. No, he doesn't. He doesn't mention it, and he misspelled it.
Yeah.
So
well,
anyway.
I feel a little warmer towards good old Howard than you do. I look at it this way. If he hadn't, taken his gunpowder and had
blasted his way, right,
take their life in their own hands and start setting off charges above the king's chamber, who would be able to do that today?
No,
right?
You wouldn't be able to do it. Can you imagine? Now, this is serious stuff. You are in the Great Pyramid. The Persians have already blasted their way in, right? And we know that, right? So they've blasted their way, and they did what they did behind him. But he's up in the king's chamber, and he's looking around, and just to look at the ceiling and go, you know what? Let's get some dynamite. Let's go. Let's just blast our way through the ceiling and see what's up there. You're right about that. That's pretty courageous.
Yeah. I mean, it was a different time period. I tend to avoid looking back in time and criticizing people for what they did and how they did it or how they believed, because, they were basically swimming in the same stream as everybody else. And when you go back to Victorian times, pretty much science was under the thumb of religion, and the whole concept of a time period and going back even beyond 6,000 years ago, it wouldn't even enter into their consciousness, because they believed that the world was created 6,000 years ago, and so that was like a religious belief. So the scientific thought and scientific thinking, and also I would say that the acceptance of undeveloped cultures and the people that inhabit the countries were viewed by Westerners with a certain amount of superiority, and so essentially, you have a discipline, if you call it a discipline, of Egyptology that had its foundations in Victorian thinking. And you can actually see that crop up when you're reading some of the books that were written and the way they refer to the indigenous people in the areas where they traveled or where they colonized. So, yeah, it's a hot button subject now, because the Egyptians are waking up and seeing that. I think they think they've been sold a bill of goods in terms of having their history written for them by foreigners. And I, as I say in my book, if history of Egypt is to be rewritten, it should be rewritten by the Egyptians.
Now, before Chris, I've got a bunch of images, and it's been a wonderful conversation tonight. But I don't want this to get away from us. So,
Right.
can we go through the images really quick and talk about them real fast before we run out of time? I told you that it was going to happen this way. Chris was like, Jimmy, I'm going to send you 50 images. We're going to have a great time. I said, Chris, I don't know, man. We're going to be talking tonight. Yeah, but so anyway, I have these
No,
images.
it's fine. Any way you want it.
Okay, let's
That's
go
a
with
really
this
good
first.
one. Right. I really wanted to show this photograph because the two men there have contributed so much to my book. I can't even begin to express how appreciative I am. The one to my right, I'm the guy in the middle, in case you're confused.
Yeah, he's a pretty cool dude too.
The guy to my right is his name is Robert Vorter, and when I was writing the Giza Power Plant, he was a sound engineer, and he had done studies in the pyramids, gathering the frequencies and recording. So, and he's been going to Egypt for a few decades. I think he did his sound test in the 90s, like 97 or something like that. But anyway, the reason I want to talk about Robert right now is because I learned just yesterday from his wife that he had passed away.
Robert passed away?
He passed away yesterday afternoon. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
he looks young.
Yeah, he's younger than me.
Yeah.
I think he's in his 60s, I think.
Wow.
Early 60s. The man to my left, his name is Dr. Friedemann Freund, and he's a NASA physicist. And so from my 2018 tour, 2019 tour, we started to question an aspect of my book where I talked about the the King's Chamber, and the granite, and how much quartz crystal is in the granite, and the potential for quartz crystal to generate piezoelectricity. So a geologist joined us on our 2018 tour, Adrian Longan. He was a very, very successful geologist, and he had inspected the granite at Aswan. He thought that it probably wouldn't exceed 20%. It was probably a lot less. And then the other aspect to it was that in order to generate electricity or to get electron flow from quartz crystal, it has to be stressed across a particular axis. And because the quartz crystal in granite is randomly orientated, the thinking was that the output would not be that great. So Robert came back to the States from that tour and started to do some research and poke around, and he came across the work of Friedemann Freund. And Friedemann Freund had been studying earthquake lights, and his objective was to see if earthquake lights were actually predictors of earthquakes. Well, they were predictors of earthquakes, and if they could set up a system where their satellites can detect where these earthquake lights are, and that they could provide a warning to the population, and it'd be like an early warning system for if an earthquake was going to happen. So he described a process, and he did experiments in his lab at NASA, and his experiments involved stressing of granite and to see if the electrons would flow just through pressure. And he found that they did. And then his further research, he determined that the process, the physics involved, was almost like semiconductor physics, which I'm not, I'm not an expert at that. I'm not an expert at anything really. But but he said that that within igneous rock there are what he calls peroxide defects, and those peroxide defects, if they are stressed, then they release these positive charge carriers that rush to the surface, and they show up in the high point, the highest point on the surface. They will go to, and they show up as earthquake lines on hilltops, around around valleys. And he had demonstrations, or he had examples of where that phenomena has occurred. His research was very, very thorough and complete, and his experiments had also been replicated by a physicist in Japan. So it was like his papers have guided other investigators to look at the phenomenon. But this is the key, and this is why my next book was entitled the Giza Tesla Connection, and that there are elements of Freud's theory that point to a source of electrons that could solve our future energy problems, because his final comments were that when the rock is stressed, it turns into a battery, right? So in the lithosphere, the Earth's crust, you have like 50 kilometers of granite or igneous rock, and the whole thing could turn into a battery for a source of electrons if it's sufficiently stimulated. And so that's where his work became so important to me. And also,
real quick before I move on to the next image, it was always difficult. His research is comprehensive and was nearly complete. The problem that we had, because the reports of earthquake lights go back thousands of years, all the way through modern history, except you're never around with the camera when the earthquake happens, right? But now we have surveillance cameras, we have door cams, we have all kinds of things that are running all the time. And just recently, the Moroccan earthquake, from a couple of weeks ago, the most phenomenal images of earthquake lights that may have ever been taken. And it's reigniting and elevating this research once again.
Right. So that is a real, I think is a real breakthrough. And it could redefine the way we access electrons. Right now, we produce electricity with power plants. We mine coal, deliver it to these pulverizers. It's injected into a furnace, and we boil water, push turbines that rotate generators, and then we harvest off the generators. So the whole idea of being able to kind of slowly wean ourselves off of that process, which actually, it's over 100 years old. So I say in my book, the advances in these objects right here, the advances that have been made with semiconductors and transistors over the years have been able to manipulate and use electrons moving, in quantum levels, or ultra small devices, and how we
We're starting to lose you, Chris.
Okay.
Well, yeah. Are you back? Wait. I think you're back. Are you back?
Okay.
Say yes.
Am I back?
Okay. Good. Yeah. You're back. So before we lose you, let's go to this next image. It's the general image, but this is the Giza Power Plant. Take us through this.
Yes. Okay. So this is essentially a cross section of the Great Pyramid. It's a schematic, and as you can see, and what I like to describe it as a machine, because it has the precision of a machine, and it also has the appearance of a machine. And then, as you have noted, it also has the feel of a machine. And so basically that was back in when I first started researching in 1977. That's the conclusion I came to, that it was a machine. The question was, what did this machine do? And so that question is what I set about trying to find answers to. So the elements. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to pull this next image up because I think that it is central to the discussion. So I just want you to continue, and we'll do it with this. Go ahead.
All right.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. This is the King's Chamber, and basically what I describe it as is the energy center in the Great Pyramid, and that if you look at to the north, with the northern shaft, which is to the right, you have a waveguide that has the dimensions that will be suitable for a hydrogen microwave, and that microwave signal is received 24/7 by the Earth. It's generated in the universe, and the dimensions are 21 centimeters. So the waveguide comes into the King's Chamber, the hydrogen signal, and stimulate emission from energized hydrogen inside the chamber that has been pumped to a higher energy state by the introduction of not only sound, but also the Freund effect, the release of electrons from the granite. And then C is the southern shaft, which collects those electrons and delivers them to the outside. But anyway, I call that an amazing maze. And some of the evidence is pretty profound when you start to go further. It's highly detailed, and I don't think we have time to go through it tonight. But if quickly go through the slides, I'll just show you the different slides. Go to the next one. Okay, this one. Okay, now what we're looking at is the fundamental discovery of Dr. Friedemann Freund, and he says dormant electronic charge carriers, when stressed, turn the rock into a battery, and so that was his conclusion. Let's go to the next slide. the Grand Gallery that you talked about, I proposed in the Giza Power Plant that there were banks of resonators inside the gallery, and they were housed in the slots. They had a series of 27 pair of slots going up the length of the gallery on the on the sides, right? And they were reaching up to the ceiling. They were equipped with resonators that resonated at different frequencies, raising the frequency. They were activated by vibrations coming through the pyramid. Interestingly, and for me, really significantly, is that there was an aspect to the King's Chamber that Petrie noted, and that was that it was expanded over an inch in some point in prehistory, and there was a violent disturbance there. The conventional thinking was that it was an earthquake that caused it.
Right.
And when you look at the lower parts of the Great Pyramid, like the descending passage, horizontal passage, the Queen's Chamber, all of that, you don't find this similar disturbance. Those features are very precise. So I proposed that it was actually a hydrogen explosion that occurred inside the King's Chamber, caused the walls to push out, and then that explosion, of course, rushed out into the Grand Gallery and destroyed, in large part, the resonators on the inside of the Grand Gallery. So
yeah, you can see you can see those notches that they're out of place. They don't make any sense. And they go up on both sides of the staircase going up, and there's
right.
a reason for them being there. And they're very precise.
Yes,
right? They're very
and I proposed a mechanical purpose for them. It was a part of the design. The evidence for the explosion actually shows up on the ceiling of the Grand Gallery, and if you look at the ceiling there, you've got two photographs, C and E, and you can see scorch marks on the ceiling.
right.
So if you look at photograph E, you can see they match the frame that I had proposed in 1998. So there is a story behind this. The fact that those exist, I had no knowledge of when I wrote my book.
Are they the same? Is there the same count of the burn marks as notches next to the stairs?
Well, most of the heavy burn is towards the King's Chamber, which is natural. So
Okay.
I don't think you have it identical down the entire length of the gallery.
Okay.
Considering that my book was published in '98. Okay. I talk about all of that in my next book. Yeah, this is an isometric view of the Grand Gallery and the northern shaft, and so the features of the northern shaft support the proposal that they were used as a waveguide. And the interesting thing about this is that they enter the chamber at the quarter wave point in the chamber. And the quarter wave point is where the highest amplitude of energy exists where there's a standing wave inside the chamber. The conventional purpose for those, it said, was to provide ventilation into the chamber. But there's a much easier way. You see that the one to the right, that's kind of a proposal of what a more simpler method that could be used to deliver air to a chamber, and it won't have to be at the quarter wave point. So the thing is that when they constructed the pyramid and they installed that waveguide, the northern shaft, it became extremely more complicated to build it and to craft it and build it into the pyramid. So that's another clue.
Question. Yeah, no question. And also the angles in all of the shafts, and I was talking about this earlier. This to me negates the orthodox Egyptologist view that these were pointing at stars. You're not going to look through one of these shafts in a contiguous way, right? And have it unbroken so you could see something on the other end. No, that simply wasn't the case with any of the shafts, right?
Right. No, I mean, even the Queen's Chamber shaft, it was closed on both ends of it, so there was no exit point. The interesting thing is that Egyptologists in a documentary in 2002, it was on the exploration of the southern shaft by Rudolf Gantenbrink's U-Poat 2 robot, where he sent his robot up the Queen's Chamber shaft to see what was at the end of it because they couldn't find the exit point on the outside. So he sent the robot up the shaft, and he came across this blockage that they called a door. Interesting that the shaft is only 8 inches square, so how it could be a door, that's some remains. But anyway, the reason now the Egyptologists give for all the shafts in the Queen's Chamber and in the King's Chamber was that they were cut, so they were put in the pyramid so that the king's soul could escape through them and go into the sky. And
apparently it didn't go. It didn't go anywhere. The shafts were all either blocked off, or unfinished.
This is where it gets really funny, because of what Gantenbrink had discovered in '93. He discovered the end of the southern shaft was blocked with limestone, and 2 metal fittings were protruding through it. And the let's say Zahi Hawass, Rainer Stadelmann, who's a German Egyptologist, and Mark Lane, an American Egyptologist, they all convey the idea that the process involved magic. So that's when my Cartesian mind kicks in, and I say, the other question that we ask now, and Robert Schoch actually wrote an article for Atlantis Rising magazine, and the question was, are Egyptologists real scientists?
Send all of your email.
He made a good argument.
Dunn. Yeah, send all of your email to Chris Dunn at GizaPower.com. Okay, but you're right about that. And even when the best part, and we'll get to this next image, the best part about Gate and Brink for me was that was done in 2 stages, right? Also, that was like Internet 1.0 when Gate and Brink made the discovery. That was one of the first websites on the web that I remember. It was called Gate and Brink's Door. It was incredible. Well, anyway, so they go back. Now they've got better robots. Now they've got a drill, right? Now they've got an orthoscopic camera. Yeah, 2002. So they get more funding. They go back to the door, the block. They drill through it. They get a camera. They stick that in. They're hoping for obviously maybe to find a chamber or something, King Tut's treasure. And so they found writing, some kind of graffiti on the right side of the shaft, but nobody knows what language it is or what it says. Have you thought about that? What you were looking at? Yeah. Well, okay. So what does it say?
There were electrical symbols.
I knew you were going to say that. That's what it is, right? Some kind of
they're electrical symbols. Well, I mean, those symbols describe a cable with a twisted pair of wires coming out of it, right? And then you have a couple of clips on either side of it, and then a line to define the polarity of the metal fittings that are in the so-called door. So
Man,
I
you're the best.
actually what?
I said you're the best. You're the best. You love rocking that boat. You love rocking that boat. You know, somebody's going to go to Hawass tomorrow. So Dunn was on with church last night, and this is what he said. So we'll find out. Let's go.
He'll say, "I didn't know Dunn went to church."
Yeah. Who is this Chris Dunn you speak about? I do not know this man. You know how he is. Okay, let's go to this next image. The north shaft bends compound angles.
Yeah. So the narrative around that briefly is that if they the conventional theory is that the bend exists so that the shaft would not interfere with the west wall of the Grand Gallery, and so I put that in to show that if they had just run it out straight without any bends, it would have missed the Grand Gallery by about 40 inches. So, that argument doesn't seem to hold up. But then, if you consider how much distance there is from the west wall of the Grand Gallery to the north shaft, you see that it's about 13 feet 6 inches. And if they had, and that kind of supports the thinking that the Grand Gallery was a highly energetic place where vibrations were affecting the resonators, and so perhaps the walls had to be that thick in order to withstand that much energy coming through that particular area of the pyramid.
That actually makes a lot of sense, Chris.
Thank you. I thought it did.
No, it does. And so I want everybody to understand what we're looking at here. This is the top view looking down into the Great Pyramid. This is the King's Chamber from above. There's the box. Some call it a sarcophagus. There is the box. This is the entryway. This is the Grand Gallery. These four stripes that you see here, that's the traps that lead in to the King's Chamber. And then this is the entrance in the lower right-hand corner right here. This is the entrance into the King's Chamber. The two shafts that you see, this is the south shaft that goes up and out. And then this is the north shaft that goes up and out. The reason why it's not at an angle here is because we're looking at it from the top going down. But you can see that it's not a straight shot going out to the night sky to let a spirit, a soul out, or to look at stars or anything else. You can't do that because there are 1, 2, 3 angles before you get to that shaft and out.
Right. And multiple bends, which are not necessary. But in conversation with my friend Eric Wilson, who's the aerospace engineer, in general, the design of waveguides for microwaves is pretty much a black art, but there are certain features that tend to appear, and that is multiple angles when a microwave is coming through a long run. So with the long run from the outside of the Great Pyramid, then they would go by those shafts, and that would affect I don't know the polarity or the trajectory or the how it enters. It would impact how it enters the King's Chamber because it would be kind of affected by those bends. Also, there are other features in the north shaft that Eric pointed out to me that he said that were common features in a waveguide like that. So it's a there's a lot of evidence that has that I've introduced into this book that was not available to me when I wrote the Giza Power Plant. But the Giza Power Plant certainly provides the backbone of this new book. And I would anticipate that research would continue on into the future. More discoveries will be made, and people will be analyzing it from a different mindset rather than the old Egyptology model.
Now, one last, and thank you. Chris, on behalf of the community and certainly myself personally, you have had a huge impact and influence on my way of thinking and my career. So I want to thank you for all of that in advance. And I'll be in Egypt in about 10 days, thinking about you every step of the way. Every step of the way is going to be all Chris Dunn. But let me ask you this really quick. Let's look at this last image. And you mentioned Robert Schoch, you mentioned John Anthony West. And in this shot, now you provided me with this shot, but I was able to, again, alone walk around and video the Sphinx, and it was a tremendous opportunity for me. But this is what I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
Here is the erosion in the Great Sphinx chamber right here that Robert Schoch went and looked at and studied for many, many years and went back because of Schwaller, de Lubitz, and John Anthony West. Robert Schoch came in. It's a well-known and well-told story now. It's part of history. But these are the erosion marks. And when you look at this compared to everything else that is going on in this picture, this would indicate to me that Robert Schoch was probably right. And the dating of the Sphinx, it may be 10,000 BC, it may be 12,000 BC, it could be older, but it's not what conventional Egyptologists want us to believe and understand, that if this is 3000 BC, 2800 BC, 2650 BC, 2700 BC, whatever that number is. But if that is the case, does that also push back the date of the Great Pyramid? Does this push back the date of Khafre and the rest of the Giza Plateau? If this is 10,500 BC, is everything else on the plateau, do you think, in that same date range?
Yes. Yeah, I can't see it in any other way myself. I mean, it really makes sense when you consider the sophistication of the granite, the artifacts, and how they were created, and what would have been necessary to create them. And there are no machines. That's the big question. Well, where are the machines? Yeah, I'd like to know too. So, when you look back at, when you consider after effects of a cataclysm would be, such as a coronal mass ejection, as described by Schoch, or a comet strike, which Randall Carlson is, talking about with the younger Dryas, then you are talking about a period of time, 10,000 years ago. And over that period of time, what would happen to most of your infrastructure if your civilization was suddenly brought to its knees? What would happen to it, And so a lot of it will be repurposed to do other things. Eventually, a lot of the metals would, if there were sophisticated metals, there would be, the erosion of them over time. When you look in an Indiana ravine and you see an old fort, Model T Fort, and it's been there for 50 years, and it's not in very good shape. You know it's not going to go another 100 years down there.
No. And it's just logic, man. It's just logic. That's all. You got to look at things logically. When does the new book come out, Chris?
It'll be out on the 23rd of January of next year. The
23rd of
that's
January.
publication date. It is available for pre-orders on Amazon or and other online bookstores, Barnes and Noble, Borders. But the print copy is going to be in the bookstores on the 23rd.
I'm excited, and I can't wait to get you back on the show. And when
It
that
will
thing is
be-
released, and we'll do it right here.
Could I tell you this story?
You can do whatever you want.
I was sent a video by some contacts I have in Egypt, and it was a news program on Egyptian television, and they were presenting the Giza, the Tesla connection, and talking about the pyramid as an energy device. And it is now being treated very, very positively, and and it seems to be all the rage now. The lost technologies, Ahmed Adley, he's got a website. It's a YouTube channel. It's in Arabic, but his videos are reaching millions of people. So the times that are changing, my friend. It's not gonna. There's a huge shift coming. Just wait. I'd like to mention, if I may, before I know you want to cut me loose here, and we're going a bit long, but making up for lost time. But could I mention a conference that I'll be speaking at this weekend?
You can mention you're Chris Dunn, man. I'm just some guy at a microphone, Chris.
Yeah.
This is your show. You do what you want.
This is called the Global Pyramid Conference. It's in Wadsworth, Illinois, up near Chicago, north of Chicago, and it's been taking place in the Pyramid House. They call it the Golden Pyramid House. It's in Wadsworth, Illinois. So I'll be up there this weekend. I think it starts the 22nd, is it? Yeah, it'll be the 22nd. And so anyway, if anybody wants to head up there, I won't have any copies of my new book, but I'll have a couple of the old book if they don't have one.
And then everybody head up there. It's just north of Chicago, and I've had a couple of guests on over the last month or two, Chris, that are also going to be there too as well. So,
cool.
Yeah. It's going to be a really good time, and everything that you're doing, it's right there, gizapower.com. We've got the links below on our website and throughout social media.
There's another one I would like to. Could I plug another one?
You can plug whatever you want. This is the Chris Dunn Hour. It's a new show that we just started. It's called the Chris Dunn Hour, the Chris Dunn Power Hour.
Yeah, right. Okay. Enough of that, Jimmy. So
Okay.
I'd like to mention the CPAC conference in California, Rancho Mirage. That takes place in October, towards the end of October, and there will be Graham Hancock will be speaking there, Ben Van
Walter
Kerkhove,
Cruttenden,
Walter Cruttenden, and a few others. So anyway, that's what I'll be doing. I'll be meeting and greeting, and love to see you if you want to show up.
I already told Walter I'm coming, and Jason Martell. So
awesome.
Yeah. They've been trying to get me up there for a long time, and those are the smart kids in the class. Okay, I'm not one, but I can hang for a minute though. I can hang in those conversations.
I know you can. Yeah. So
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm serious, man. Just thank you for everything, and I can't wait to get you back on the show when you release the book, and we'll do a big release thing here on Fade to Black, and I look forward to it.
Yeah, hopefully we don't run into the same
that we're doing right now. See, okay, so I'm going to say goodnight. Chris froze at the last moment. Thank you so much, Chris, and have safe travels over to Chicago, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
Okay, Jimmy. Thank you. Bye.
Have a good night, Chris. Christopher Dunn, everybody, and it is GizaPower.com. The new book comes out in January. The links are below. Thank you so much, Christopher Dunn. And yeah, that perfect night. Yeah, okay. So we had a little bump in the road in the beginning, but things like that happen. It's not that big of a deal, and turned out to be one of the best shows I've done in a long time. Thank you so much, Chris. You are the absolute very best. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. And again, my computer just went blank. I think we are literally going through something tonight with the CME. Thank you to Dennis and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2023 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black of the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I'll see everybody tomorrow night. Until then, I want you to be safe. Go Backley Tappy.